Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to yet another edition of the Foxhole. I believe it's number 5. At this point, I'm Aleko Shigonis, co-founder and president of Red Fox Coffee Merchants and the host of the show. Zach Fritzhand, our director of business development, is also on with me. And we have 4 really fabulous guests this Friday. A few old friends, Kyle Glanville from Go Get 'Em and Glanville and Babinski. Eileen Rinaldi from Ritual, Mark Capriotti from ReAnimator, and a good new friend, Eric Escalante from the Arrow in Portland. Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to have you.
Thanks for having us.
We've touched on a few great topics, I feel like, in the past, from the office in Mexico to FOB pricing and its pertinence to the industry. And this week, we're going to take a step back from the immediate Red Fox world and get some perspective from our clients and our customers and roasters and retailers who are being affected by the current COVID-19 crisis. Retail in the coffee sector has obviously been as greatly affected as anything. And I think we have a few really great guests here to talk us through what their experiences have been in the past couple months. So let's get started with the questions here. The first one's more topical, but I think really relevant and something that folks want to hear. We're curious what each of your current operations look like in each of your own businesses here. Erica, why don't we let you go first?
Okay. So I'm the owner of the Arrow Coffeehouse in Portland, Oregon, and I just have one location now. I used to have 2, but I actually just sold one in September, so I kind of feel a little lucky. But I just have one location in the city right now, and we actually have stayed open the entire time. And we have a full food menu. We bake everything in-house, and then we do specialty coffee. And so right away, we stopped allowing customers inside the cafe, but I installed a drive-through speaker box outside. And so when customers come to the door, we could still talk with them and have a little conversation. All of our ordering and payments are online. And so people put in their order ahead of time, come up to the door, tell us their name, and then we give them their item. And now I am a wholesale baker. I have picked up 4 cafes now since COVID started to bake for, including Stumptown Coffee. And so now I'm a wholesale baker, I guess. And so that's our full operation right now.
That's really great. It's been impressive to see a lot of you diversify your operations and kind of become different businesses in some sense over the last couple months. Kyle, why don't we throw it to you, because I know you've done some of that yourself down south.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So so we have 8 locations, 4 of which are temporarily closed. When the crisis started, middle of March 16th, we had 8 locations. We actually opened our 9th location about a week later in Culver City, and then permanently closed one of our locations a few weeks after that. So it's been kind of a wild time. So we started with 8, we have 8, but that includes opening 1 and closing 1. But we learned pretty quickly. We've tried to stay open this whole time, and kind of rapidly iterating and sort of pivoting the business on a daily basis, especially in that sort of the last 2 weeks of March. And what we learned pretty quickly is that, about half of our locations are in these kind of concentrated office downtown kind of areas, and those ones were just totally dead. And so, over the course of a few weeks, we kind of progressively shuttered temporarily those shops. Obviously, our other cafes took like a pretty immediate hit. And at first, I think we were still letting people into the cafes, and we posted like a what we called like our house rules all over for people to follow. And it got feeling pretty scary, to be honest, because, you know, it only takes like a few people who aren't really taking it seriously to make everybody else feel unsafe. And so we quickly went into, you know, the sort of second phase of this, which was to serve only at the door. And we were doing contactless payments, and like we've always had like an order ahead app, and we were doing that as well. And eventually we eliminated, you know, any on-site payment and just went to ordering at the app. We posted a little QR code so people can scan it and just download the app and be in business with us in no time. But the thing that I think is really keeping our 4 locations that are open afloat is we adopted a very real sort of pantry offering. And Eileen, I apologize for retreading familiar territory. But, you know, something about us and I gather, you know, Erica's cafe as well, is we've always run a pretty robust kitchen thing. We have full kitchens in most of our locations with hoods, and we offer breakfast and lunch. And so I noticed going to the grocery store in the early days, and I'm sure most of you did, that one, it felt completely unsafe to be there and people were behaving like animals and it just seemed wrong. But 2, like suddenly the run on dried beans and rice and certain things, eggs, bacon, meat, not produce for whatever reason, not fish for whatever reason, but these kinds of like categories of things you just couldn't get your hands on. And meanwhile, you know, we deal with these, you know, boutique food vendors who were losing all of their business. And we were hearing from, you know, we're seeing at the grocery store that they can't keep milk in stock. And then we're hearing from our vendors that they're dumping out hundreds of gallons of Strauss milk because they have nobody to sell it to. And so for us, it was very clear that there was, I don't want to use the word opportunity because this whole thing sucks, but for us, it was very clear that there was an opportunity for us to connect these boutique, incredible vendors that we've, you know, been working with for years to our customers and offer the products that we buy, some of the products that we, like the ingredients that we make, you know, like our fermented hot sauce or whatever. Obviously, whole bean coffee is a big part of that. And so we launched our pantry and have quickly built it up so that you can essentially accomplish your grocery shopping with us. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to have like 12 different types of whatever, all these different brands, but we have mostly like, you know, what we think is the best version of the things that people need to get by in their house, including produce. And it's been really, really well received. And I think at first our customers were like, we're buying this here because we don't want you to fail. But now it's like, we're buying this here because this is a way better experience and the stuff is really good. So that's been kind of the main, you know, we certainly still sell a lot of coffee and our kitchens are still open, but the pantry has been a huge, huge boost in keeping us afloat.
Yeah, I think people feel safer in that situation, honestly. Like I haven't been into Berkeley Bowl or Whole Foods in 2 months, but I'm picking up CSA boxes and getting all of my pantry goods at Gemini Bottle in San Francisco, one of my favorite wine shops, who's carrying virtual coffee now too, which is great.
Thanks for the intro.
Yeah. Next, Eileen.
So we are operating, I have 6 cafes, 3 are open, 3 are closed. I'm sitting in my Haight Street Cafe right now. And the 2 of the 3, Valencia and Hayes Valley, we've managed to keep open the whole time. Napa, we closed and then reopened last Friday. And we're gonna be planning on reopening our other 3 cafes over the next month or so. And then the roastery is still going strong, but in all cases, business is completely different. Like you don't go into the roastery unless you're there working on shift. So like even I am not going into the roastery or into the cafes that are open unless I'm there to do work that has to be done there. So I think there are just a ton of modifications to prioritize safety that are reflected in that. And then also, like G&B, we're doing a general store model at Valencia Street because it's a really big cafe. So it was very easy to add extra items because we've got tons of space without having customers come in. And then at all 3 of the cafes that are open, we have plexiglass up between the customers and the baristas. We're requiring masks, whether or not the county that we're in requires it. And we're limiting, you know, for the cafe, like at Hayes Valley, we're still letting people come in, but only 1 at a time. So things are looking very different than just being open.
Yeah, seems like it. Mark, we're gonna go to you last, and you have a different situation with your operations that kind of segues into the second question, which is how people are dealing with landlords. So maybe we can get you to tie both of those questions together in your response. Also, as I forgot to mention, as I usually do, please share your questions, audience, with us in the chat box, and we'll get to as many of them as we can later. Thanks for reminding me, RJ Joseph, who is the backbone of this show and Red Fox's content in general, keeping me on my toes as always.
Producer, it's your producer.
He's the producer, exactly. Yeah. Mark, it's yours.
Hello, Mark Capriotti from ReAnimator Coffee in Philly. So yeah, I think what Aleko was referring to is we have 4 locations. We just opened our 4th only 5 days before having to shut down, but none of them have reopened. I think probably, well, obviously there's a safety issue and there's a lot of confusion, but we also do not have a robust food operation. And I think, you know, I think it's a little more confusing when there's not, you know, when people are coming to us mostly for coffee and a pastry or something rather than a meal, be it breakfast or lunch or whatever. So yeah, we're planning on reopening hopefully soon. A lot of the things that were mentioned before are in our sort of plan for reopening. So in terms of landlords, first thing we did was kind of like just throw an email out and nothing specific, just saying, hey, we want to talk about this. And then jumped on a phone call with them and tried to, you know, let them know the position we're in. We have no sales. Doesn't make sense to pay rent. And I think no landlord kind of freaked out, but everybody was like, all right, we'll think about it. We'll get back to you. And then from there was a couple of different approaches. Our bigger landlord sent us like a legal document that we needed to sign before we proceeded with the conversation. And then we have the rest of our landlords are just kind of, they own 1 or 2 buildings. So it was more conversational. And our current situation varies. You know, we have one set of landlords that for one of our locations, they actually have a Fannie or Freddie loan. So they were able to get a couple of months reprieve. And I believe it's tacked on at the end. I don't know the details, but they're not asking us to pay rent back. And then, you know, the one landlord that sent us the legal document, there was another document where we have this whole, you know, like payback plan, which is, you know, theoretical, I guess, because we need to figure out, I mean, they were at least, they made us agree to it, but they were open to like future conversations, because one of the things I said to each landlord is, 1, we have no sales now. 2, we're not just going to snap back. So if we're down, you know, 50% or even 30%, you know, like our margins are so slim, we require a critical amount of people coming in the door every day to pay all of our bills and employees and vendors. So, so yeah, like I think the general consensus is like some people, they want to get paid back right now. But I mean, I think the future is uncertain. Who knows if we can survive or if we're going to have to renegotiate, you know, because I think everybody on this call is probably thinking the same thing. What's the landlord going to do if we can't operate there? So,
Yeah, but it's interesting. What the landlord's going to do if no one's paying rent there? You know, I think it's a broader question.
yeah.
I want to jump back to Kyle real quick because I know you've had a specific situation with a cafe and a landlord, and making a pretty real decision in the moment. No.
Yeah, well, anybody who's known me or worked with me probably knows that I'm not necessarily a conflict-oriented person, but I'm very comfortable with conflict. And leading up to April 1st, and I will note, like I am very lucky. Our company is very lucky because we have a really good attorney that we've been leaning on pretty hard throughout this whole process. And if you're a small business owner, I strongly suggest you have a good representation on your side too. I did as much homework as I could leading up to April 1st and sent every landlord an email. We had 11 at the time, just letting them know that rent wasn't coming on the 1st, and to reach out, you know, to make a plan. From my perspective, the best way to communicate that was not to leave any room or oxygen for a discussion based around interpretation, because what I found is a lot of landlords kind of responded like we were flexing or like taking advantage of the moment to not pay. And usually those were sort of the smaller, you know, more mom and pop oriented landlords. And the bigger ones were like, yeah, okay, you know, let's sit on this conversation for a month or two and come back to it, and we'll figure it out down the road, which is, you know, sort of counter to maybe how you would expect things to go. I think you would expect the bigger landlords to send you some pro forma letter demanding payment and making threats, and the smaller landlords to be more soulful, but it was actually kind of the opposite. And I think part of that is because a lot of landlords are small businesses too, and they do depend on that income from the rental properties. So yeah, we approached it that way. I think of our 11 landlords, 9 of them were very chill and have been flexible in very different ways, whether it's, you know, coming up with some kind of a payment plan, or just deferring or canceling all or some portion of the rent altogether. One was a little bit freaked out because he was in that smaller landlord class who kind of needed the income, and the structure of his loan is kind of gnarly, and he couldn't really get out of paying his debt on the property. And then another one was just a straight up asshole about it, and and ironically, the one who was an asshole about it was actually the one we didn't have a lease with, because of like a kind of a wild set of circumstances. We were subleasing the space. The company that we were subleasing from went out of business, and so suddenly we were working directly with the landlord, and our rent went from $3,500 to $4,000 a month, depending on our sales, to $13,000 a month. And we were in lease negotiations and finally had agreed to the sort of terms, the LOI, and then they plunked the lease down in front of us on March 25th, you know, and well into this new situation. And I told them, you know, we're not signing this lease. And and also we're not paying rent this month. What do you want to do about it? And rather than sort of responding with any sort of flexibility, they just started making threats. And ironically, that shop was also our lowest volume shop. So we were looking at a shop that was already our lowest volume, our highest rent, and with the sort of most stressed business relationship with the landlord. And so from an X's and O's, balance sheet perspective, very easy choice to close that store. From a human collateral perspective, absolutely devastating. I've never closed something, and I think my key responsibility as business owner is to live up to my side of the contract, which is you work, you have a place to work, and in return, we take care of at least the money part for you. And so I felt a very real sense of failure of responsibility in that moment. And that was the hardest part about it. Leaving that location, the viability of that location, and the relationship with the building itself, whatever. we'll get through that. Yeah, that was a hard decision. The more distance I get from it, the better I feel. And something that we've done since then is actually signed another lease on a space in West Hollywood that is a former restaurant. So we'll be able to convert it really quickly. And those people who are missing work or who lost some work there will have an opportunity to get it back soon.
Oh, that's great news. I know that's going to be the tricky part for a lot of you, along with just weathering the storm. Erica, have you had much discussion with your landlord about wading through this mess?
Yeah, we're in a unique situation because our space is actually a shared space. I co-own and run a commissary kitchen where we rent it out to over a dozen small businesses in Portland. And so my coffee shop actually rents the space from Larry. And with it being a shared space, and it's not ginormous, I mean, it's large, but we aren't able to share the kitchen with anyone else because my crew is in there and we don't want to be with any other people. Our landlord does own a lot of buildings, but his office happens to be like right next door, and so we see them all the time. And our initial conversation with them was not friendly whatsoever. They were basically like, your responsibility is your contract, and you should get loans, and you should get assistance or whatever you can, and you owe us money, and that's that. Yes. They are still that way right now, except they've kind of just accepted that we're just going to pay what we can, and that's that. But every month they're like, just a reminder, your balance is now $10,000. Okay, now your balance is $12,000, and they just keep sending that reminder over and over. And so it's tricky because we have all these small businesses that also rent space from us and have either paid for their space already, have paid for their hours, or they're trying to decide when they're going to be able to get back to work. And so it's kind of a big mess. I'm hoping I can charm them over with my gracious smile and response at some point, but I don't know when that will be.
Gotta be worth something, right? Come on. Look at
that. Yeah, I hope.
Yeah. Eileen, I know you have several landlords, no?
Like 10, something like that. Kyle, thank you for sharing the story on why that cafe closed, because that was a mystery for me as somebody who has many locations on like what situation leads to that. So here's what I want to say about leases. All of my landlords have been, my experience has been very similar to Kyle's in that the smaller landlords are like, oh, okay, you're not paying rent, but oh, you will someday, I hope, and then the bigger ones are like, yeah, we didn't expect you to. We'll talk later. And for me, my landlord, like my whole business is built on having good relationships with my landlords because I don't pay market rent. Like I pay my employees more, I have better benefits, I pay more for coffee. And where does that give? It gives in my rent. And so for me, I almost look at my rent during this time as like, the relationship I have with my landlords is a lot like, I think how coffee farmers feel about working with me, or how I view my relationship with coffee farmers. Like, in a way, it doesn't really matter where the coffee market is. I'm going to pay, you know, what I think this coffee is worth on its own, regardless of whether where the commodity market is. And I think that in a way, a lot of my relationships with landlords are the same way, where in 2019, my rent was really low compared to market rent for most of my spaces. And if I managed to pay that at some point for these months, then that will have been really high. Does that make sense? But overall, it's kind of balancing out, and I'm gonna look at the long term. And my landlords, you know, I have one landlord who's been my landlord for 16 years, and like, he knows me, and he knows that I take care of stuff, and he knows that my business is resilient. And so he's not going to stress about this, but at the same time, I'm going to take care of that relationship by figuring out a way to pay that rent eventually, not right now, but at some point. I think the best advice that I've gotten that I haven't been hearing people talk about is in going to your landlords and talking about what you're doing now for rent, also put an amendment in your lease for the duration, because even if things are starting to open back up where you are, we are likely going to be facing another shutdown at some point in the next 12 to 18 months. So rather than having it have to be a conversation all over again when it happens the next time, put it in your lease now that if your county or your state mandates a shutdown, you pay 20% of your rent, or 50%, or 75%, or whatever makes sense for your business model during these shutdown times. And then you don't have to waste the time going back and forth. And you also don't expect them to think, because they could say, well, we waived your rent last time, so we're not going to be so generous this time. You want to have that set up ahead of time. And then I think also, like, we're 2 months into this, and I think that we'll see the commercial landscape, the effects of this in like 6 to 12 months. So I think in 6 to 12 months, commercial rents are going to be a fraction of what they are today.
Have you all had the experience that, sorry to interrupt, have you had the experience that like the commercial real estate folks are like way behind and sort of understanding the impact here?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, like they don't realize
honestly,
it's happening.
The best resource I've gotten for what the future of retail looks like is from a real estate agent who like pulled all of this like amazing resources together of like, well, architects are saying this, and designers are saying this, and restaurant owners are saying this, and these are all factors that we need to be considering for the future.
Yeah.
In my experience, it's really useful.
In my experience, it sounds like more like Kyle's, where people thought it was going to snap back immediately, and they weren't even considering that when it does come back, your sales are going to be decreased because your traffic is going to be decreased, and there's going to be a level of apprehension for a certain percentage of customers.
Yeah, I think a lot of these commercial, landholders are also living the difficulties that we all are. We're all on the same hook in a way. They were living in really great circumstances leading up to a few months ago, a really prosperous moment, and maybe having bitten off more than they can chew, now really like facing the supreme consequence. Mark and I had a really good conversation about this a few weeks ago that I thought was really interesting. There's a lot of them that are facing bankruptcy as much as anyone else is right now. Really honestly.
Right, and there's no the government is not. I mean, I haven't read anything about how the government is helping landlords or whatever you want to call them, real estate businesses, large or small, which would then in turn help all retail, regardless of whether it's coffee restaurants or a boutique.
Yeah, the government has been super sort of mealy-mouthed about how they will actually want to address rent and mortgages. The fact of the matter is, if there had been a freeze instituted, not only for rent, but also for debt associated to property ownership, none of this would be an issue. It is as insane for a landlord to lose their space because of this as it is for us to lose our business because of this.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think and that's where like empathy and honest discussion and transparency comes into play. The most success I've had in those conversations has been ones where we can like kind of, lay our cards out on the table, no posturing, no like threats, and just kind of find the place, that works. But that's not where everybody goes in times of stressful business. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Eileen, can I come back to you for the next question, because you're kind of halfway down that path already in your last response, and then folks, we'll get to as many of the questions from the audience as we can right after this last question from our end, which is, how do you see the retail coffee landscape over the course of the next 12, 18 months or so? What's it like to come back?
Oh, man. I mean, it's so hard. I'm just beginning to try and wrap my head around it. I mean, I think one of the positive things is I think that we're going to see really creative use of space. Things that are being talked about in San Francisco is shutting streets like Haight Street and Valencia Street to car traffic so that restaurants and cafes can have outdoor seating in what used to be the street. And, maybe that would just be on certain days a week or certain times of day. I think, we also have like a lot of weird little patio spaces behind commercial spaces that aren't used right now because they're not big enough or whatever. But my hope is that the cities will figure out ways to allow us to use space really creatively. I also think that, because I think that realistically, we have to plan on having our occupancy cut to a third or half of what your legal occupancy is. And so what does your business look like? Like Mark said, like most of our businesses are predicated on needing to serve so many customers to get the volume. But I guess the way that I'm thinking about it is I'm hoping that I can keep all my to-go customers outside like we're doing now. And then maybe we offer some kind of an elevated experience for people who are coming to the cafe, knowing that that's going to be a much smaller number. So instead of it's just, like I could imagine doing table service for the people who are coming to stay, but then that's something where instead of having like a typical, $7 or $8 per person ticket average, it's a much higher ticket average to balance out the fact that it takes more labor and there's fewer people doing it. I think about the Italian model of things. Like the first time that I ever had a coffee in Italy, I was like, 20 or something, and I ordered a coffee at the counter and paid, and then I sat down and they came and told me in Italian that I couldn't do that, and I don't speak Italian, so it was very confusing to me why I couldn't sit at the table that nobody was sitting at. But maybe that model makes sense now, where it's like you pay one price if you're not using the shared space, and you pay a different price for the shared space.
Yeah.
Those are some of my ideas.
Yeah. Those are good ideas. Kyle, can you replicate the original G&B, like almost bartender kind of style of service in the new world? Multiple walk-up windows? What's it going to be like?
Well, I think, it's funny because the premise like of our whole concept is like these small spaces that we jam full of people, and you're kind of all smushed up against each other, and the music is a little bit too loud, and you're like we really want to like physically bring community into a space, and there is a sort of level of intimacy to our locations that it's not really a doable thing in the COVID universe. I gotta say, like I've been paying a lot of attention to what Governor Newsom and what our Mayor Garcetti have been saying publicly. I don't believe in the progressive unwinding at this point. I think that we've found a comfortable place with our shops that are open where we can operate, make a profit, serve people at the sidewalk, limit, you know, the amount of labor that we have to throw at it. And like we're in kind of a sweet spot for this new universe. I'm very freaked out about the notion of this like 50-50, like you're doing that model and also trying to do some hybrid version of like a normal model, because volume is the name of the game with a coffee shop. And it requires a lot of people to do that service. And so I don't see us, and luckily I think like the change is going to be slow enough and progressive enough that we can respond in real time and have some ideas about the thresholds and like what the benchmarks that we want to hit, but we don't have to know exactly what we're going to do. And I think honestly, pretending to know could be more harmful than you know, responding to what's happening in real life. But I don't see a world where we can do this like 20% occupancy, 50% occupancy thing, and where that would be any better for our customers, for our team, for our community, for us, than what we're doing right now. So my expectation in the way that we're approaching it as a company is we're prepared to operate and refine and optimize for what we have now for at least a year. And
can I ask something, Kyle?
Yeah.
Is the way you're operating legal? Like because in San Francisco, like yeah, exactly. So in San Francisco, the way we're operating is not legal. Like I can't take over the entire sidewalk to have my customers on the sidewalk. Like that's not, like in normal times. I mean, obviously they're allowing it, but we're gonna need some guidance from the city saying like, yes, you can operate out your door, you can use this window, like, because normally there's a whole permit process for that, which we didn't go through, we just did it. And, you know, so like, I don't know, I'm eager to see some pressure or some leadership from cities about how we're gonna do this, if that's what we're gonna do.
City of LA has adopted some big changes, and there's definitely moments where the guidance from the health department conflicts with the guidance from the building department or your planning. And at first, the city was being pretty unchill about reconciling those differences in guidance. At this point, you know, I think everybody's operating pretty firmly in a gray area. To be honest, like I'm comfortable with that. Like we can be gray. You know, in terms of what we have going on inside the shop, you know, we are adhering to absolute best practices as far as health and safety standards are concerned. We do have a lot of customers outside. We do use public space. We put down the little markers to, you know, keep people distanced by 6 feet and all that stuff. But you know, a line spilling out onto the sidewalk is nothing new. I don't think we have any of our like furniture on public ground or anything like that. So I think we're pretty legal. But I also think like it's impossible to be completely legal. It's kind of like if you're driving a car, like a cop can find a reason to pull you over. If you get an inspection, an inspector can find a reason to close you down. So yeah, to the best of my knowledge, like we're legal. We have been inspected by the health inspector at 3 of our shops since this started. We've gotten A's and we haven't been threatened, so I feel good.
So I mostly agree with what Kyle's talking about in terms of service, and that's kind of what we're planning to do. But as someone who's from a city with more real weather than some of the other cities on this conversation, like, you know, when it like I feel like if you're in LA, there's a lot of outdoor based restaurants, cafes. And, you know, when you look at Philly, where now for some reason we get tropical rainstorms every 3 days. We want to serve out the door. We want to be safe, and that's definitely what we're going to do in the near term. But what happens if you get one of those days where the weather is just so bad that, people aren't going to line up outside,
We actually did
so
have a week of rain after changing our model, which, as noted, is pretty rare. And our stores died. There was nothing happening, and that
Right.
definitely sucks.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like, for some people listening in, that's probably going to be a concern, and I'm not really sure how we get around that. Like we've loosely talked about, can we make an area where people come in, but then that kind of, then there's like a weird situation where how many people come in at a time, and then it just starts to get weird,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if I can add, I am prepared to keep my business the same for the next year. I don't want anyone in my space. It makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes my staff feel uncomfortable. I'm prepared even to just turn the whole cafe into a wholesale bakery if I have to, because because all of our ordering is online, everyone does it in advance, and so we don't have anyone waiting outside. We don't have a line ever. They get to the door, we get them out. Our goal is to get them away from the door within 2 to 3 minutes. And we also started offering delivery just in our immediate 1 mile radius. And we've been able to rock that and also keep our sales up, keep that volume up, and keep our numbers high by offering that kind of experience. And so I do agree with Eileen that this is going to take so much creativity, and I'm so excited to see what everyone does, because I love hearing Eileen's idea about this like outdoor, indoor specialty experience, because that's what specialty coffee is all about, right? We elevate these things that might be everyday to some people, and we change it and we make it unique to who we are as people and who we are as shops. And that's so exciting to me. Like, I know it's a hard time, but like, as I'm listening to y'all, I'm like, this is so cool. We have such an opportunity to elevate experiences with customers in our own ways. I know for us, we are going to stay the way that we are for a long time. And until we feel totally safe, I have 2 small kids, until I feel completely safe around other people, we're not going to open the door again.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that there's going to be a deep need for being near other people again. Like, even if you're going out for something with your family and you're not going outside of your pod, but like going somewhere where you can eat 6 feet away from another pod, and just like being near other people. I think we're gonna need to figure out ways to do that, because we're social creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why long term it's going to come back. When we've had nice days every few days here, everyone's in the parks, everyone's outside walking. People want to be outside, they want to see other people. And I think they do want to get back to pre-COVID times. But, I also think for us, at least, it's like, how do we get to that future? So.
Yeah. Let's segue into some questions from the audience. We have a lot of really great questions. I want to start with one from our old friend, Jeff Watts. And add something to it first. Has there been any change in your customers' consumption behavior? And then his actual question is, what meaningful change in your customers' consumption behavior due to COVID-19 do you expect to remain as somewhat permanent even a year or so or 2 down the line? Anyone?
I'll say.
Go ahead, Mark.
Sorry. I was just going to say, as someone who doesn't have retail open but has our online business open, I think that we do expect that people are learning that they can make coffee at home and they understand what buying coffee, even from a small roaster like us, is like online. So I don't know how much of that's going to remain, but I think we should expect some of that to remain.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing I've noticed is people are investing in their home brewing equipment. You know, I think that people used to drink a lot of coffee at the office, and now their office is their home. And I think my favorite comment that we keep getting is people who have invested in a good grinder. Or like, I didn't realize how much flavor I was missing out on before. So that's a good one.
I think that the consumption of coffee throughout history has been, you know, for a consumer choice type of product has historically been pretty inelastic. And so I think that we can expect that people will want coffee. And I think that the medium is changing, obviously, for us, you know, for whatever hit we've taken at retail, and which has been substantial. We've also seen a pretty dramatic boost in e-commerce sales, and opportunity around sort of like education and, you know, getting people into home brewing, which is honestly something that we were trying to do before and feeling like we were spinning our wheels because people were like, can't we just come and get you to make it for us? But now, which is like, yeah, fine, that's a good way too. But now people are getting into it, and it's a whole new opportunity to talk to those customers. So, you know, our roastery our sales are down overall. I don't want to confuse that, but our roastery is roasting more coffee than we had before. And what that tells me is that, you know, people are always going to value coffee. You will kick certain habits. Maybe you're going to go from $30 a bottle to $20 a bottle for your wine or whatever, but coffee is kind of like the last thing to go for a lot of folks because it's the most affordable of those kind of luxury items. So, you know, I anticipate that a lot of the subscribers that we've added to our coffee club will stay on. Certainly, you know, if there were a return, which is a big if, to normal behavior in the coffee shops, I think a few of them would peel off, but I think a lot of people will stay because we're all gonna find new practices. I think people will bake bread for a long time, and people will fall in love with their pour over kits, and so that's gonna change. And for us, for Go Get 'Em Tiger, you know, I think our customers would riot if we stopped selling them the crazy delicious eggs that we've been selling them and the Bub and Grandma bread. So like that stuff feels permanent, or at least possibly permanent to me.
Should we keep going? Any other thoughts?
I'll throw one more change in there, which is even before shelter in place went into effect officially, we started discouraging cash. We still accept cash because that is required by law in San Francisco, but we ask people to pay another payment, and most people figure it out. And I don't think cash is ever going to come back the way it used to be.
We have had several questions about the payroll protection loans from Brian Jones, David Wallman, Darren Daniel, maybe even another one. Have you all applied for those? What kind of process has it been like? What's the reality been? Erica, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, so for me, I was just really skeptical of any of those programs. I'm really young, so I've never really gotten any kind of loans from anyone. So, but one day my bank said the PPP loan was open, so I sat down real quick and I put in my application, and it worked that day. And within a week, I had like a lot of money in my bank account. So I feel very, very lucky that I got the PPP loan. It works for me because I still have a full staff of people. I have like 7 people on staff right now working a lot of hours. And so it has been a game changer for me, and it was really easy. So I know that's not the case, and I feel really bad that other people have had such a hard time. I did not apply for any other assistance, but I did get the PPP, and it was really simple for me. The only thing that's scary is that the terms for forgiveness were not clear whatsoever. It was the shortest loan document I've ever seen. I think it was 2 pages total of that loan document. It was so short, and nothing about forgiveness was mentioned. And so I feel a little scared about that, but I just took the risk, and we'll see how it plays out for me later.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it must be a tricky proposition for retail, considering most of you aren't operating anywhere near what you used to in the retail sense. And, you know, how do you keep those places staffed?
Yeah, I think that's another misstep that the government made. Like we talked about earlier, they're not talking about landlords. I think they're missing the fact that if you look, we co-own a restaurant, and if we get it for the restaurant, I don't know, we could never hire back all the staff, because if we switch to doing takeout, you don't have other staff members that are a part of, you know, a dining room situation. And, you know, I'm hoping, we applied for the second round. We don't know if we're going to get it, but even if we do, you know, we're still waiting to open because of safety issues and whatnot. But then even when we do, are we going to be able to get the same full-time equivalency in terms of employees when we have reduced hours and, you know, reduced operation in general? So I think for us, it's a big question mark, and, you know, we're not really sure what we're going to do.
Yeah, I was really, really on it with the PPP, the first round, and woke up at 5 in the morning and mashed refresh on the application page with Bank of America. And as soon as it was open, I had everything ready to go and fired away in 15 minutes. And then it was just crickets. I heard nothing from them. And then I read on the news that the money was out. And in preparation for the second round, I was just like, fuck this. And we applied through 7 different lenders. We went through Square, we went through Cabbage, we went through Bank of America again, and a bunch of different sort of like Lendio and those kinds of things. And we also went through a really tiny community bank here in LA, and they got it done. It was like one email, here's our stuff. That was like Saturday, and on Sunday at like 1:30 in the morning, the banker emails me saying like, you're in, it's all good, we got you. And I didn't really believe it was real. It was definitely essential for us because we still have big payroll. We're still paying a lot of people to come to work, and our number one focus as a company right now is keeping people that want to work working. And so, but it came through, it landed, we got it. And I feel, it's funny, I feel embarrassed about it a little bit. I feel like, why do I get this? And us, why do we get this? I know people are still struggling to get it. And I also feel terrified about all the potential ways to step in shit that seem to be, like, because the terms are so poorly expressed in the documentation, because forgiveness is supposed to be this 8-week time frame. And so we're like, what kind of work can we get people doing in this 8-week time frame? And so like I circulated this survey, and I was like, if you have any special talents that could contribute in any way, like put them in this survey, and like we'll try to figure out a way to hire you to do it for the company for money. But I've accepted that there's, operating at half capacity, even then, like we're not going to blow through the whole loan in the 8 weeks, so it's not all going to be forgiven, but what will remain will be a low interest bit of debt that, you know, for me, like liquidity is everything right now. And so I'm very grateful to have it.
Yeah. RJ just typed in survivor's guilt to the chat box, which I totally relate to after our loan as well.
Yeah.
Eileen, you have anything you want to add there?
I was just gonna say that, you know, I had a really, really hard time finding a lender to take my application. I have banked with Bank of America for 15 years, but I don't have any loans with them. The bank that I do have loans with didn't do the PPP. The lender that is not a bank that I have loans with, SBA loans, wasn't ready to take applications. And so it was like a full week where I did nothing else. I did no childcare. I did no cooking. I did no other work. I was just on that and like talking to people and being like, can you do it? Can you do it? Who, you know, and hustling, you know, and then to find the money ran out. So we have our, we got somebody to take it in the second round. So we'll see.
Oh, that's great. Great news. We're running out of time. Maybe we should take one more question and call it there, which I'm sorry to all the other great questions out there. We're getting a lot of stuff revolving around staff members who have gone on unemployment and what happens with them, getting them to come back to work or not. Yeah, are there any thoughts there? What do you guys, what's the thought going forward? I know it can't be easy or maybe not even perfectly formulated yet, but folks are curious.
Yeah, this has been a huge.
I can feel that one. I mean,
it's all you.
Eileen and then Kyle. Eileen, go ahead.
Now I'm getting a notice that my internet's unstable. Okay, so from the very beginning, we gave people the choice of whether to furlough or not furlough. So the 2 locations that we kept open with people who chose to work. And everybody who said, I feel safer being at home, chose to furlough. They kept their insurance. And now basically like 2 weeks ago, I said, okay, let's work on getting all the cafes back, you know, over the next 6 weeks. Tell me when you want to come back to work. And people are deciding for themselves, like, okay, I feel safe enough now, and we're trying to figure out creative ways, like for people to carpool so they don't have to take BART, and figure out ways for them to come back that does feel really safe. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. And you know, interestingly, of my, I think 40 or so people who chose to furlough, one has asked, how does my choice to not come back to work affect my future chance of employment? And I think that's a really good question. And I think, you know, I'm an optimist and things generally work out. That's just the way I look at things. And so I have faith that people will come back at the right amount of time for our business. And it wouldn't, but you know, and I have had thought about like, okay, well, if I actually got to the point where I had to hire people from the outside to run things, what would that look like? But I would certainly reach out to my staff who's choosing unemployment and say, look, you're now at the point where you may not have a job when you get back, and let them choose.
Okay.
So, but I haven't gotten to that, fortunately.
I appreciate the frank response. Thank you. Kyle.
Yeah, we made returning or staying at work optional as well. Every couple of weeks, we circulate a survey to our team. We use Slack. We were actually going to stop using Slack for our retail employees, but now it's like totally essential. But we circulate a survey every 2 weeks. We ask people to respond, and the questions are based around, you know, are you working enough? Are you working too much? Do you want to be working? Don't you want to be working? What are your concerns? Let us know. And those have been really informative just to take the temperature of where everybody's at. We've had a lot of staff who would prefer to stay home and stay away from work and let things cool down. We've picked up, because we are, you know, lucky to be able to do this, and we have PPP, we picked up, you know, everybody's healthcare through this time. And those people have been assured that, there will be a role for them when they're ready to return. Now, does that mean that that role is part of a smaller pie? I hope not. Trying to sign leases or trying to be aggressive counterintuitively in this time to have enough of an operation to keep people employed. But also I wanted to mention that here in the state of California, there's unemployment benefits, but there's another program called WorkShare. And this is the way that our team can make absolutely the most money in this time. WorkShare is a hybrid program where, as an employer, you certify a staff member's reduction in hours, and they are given unemployment benefits to sort of bridge that gap. Plus, they are still eligible for the whatever you call that extra bit of money from the CARES Act. So we have spent so much time, and we have a very, very good HR person who's a former barista who's been getting wise on this. And again, we're lucky to have a great attorney and a great accountant. But the WorkShare program here affords our team the opportunity to make by far the most money in this circumstance, and it's more than unemployment. And it allows us to keep people employed and deploying the PPP funds as quickly as we can in this time.
For my shop, it was a little different because actually in February, I had a few people quit and we were understaffed, and I was really stressed about March because I knew we were understaffed and we needed to do a big hiring round. Joke on me, I shouldn't have been stressed about that, I guess. But I ended up only laying off one person because they take public transportation and it was still rainy and they didn't want to bike in. And so I laid them off so that they could collect unemployment. And then I still had to hire like 3 people because we were already understaffed and our sales came back quite quickly. And I ended up finding all these really excellent, experienced people that have worked at big name restaurants, like cooks that are incredible, to come and work for me. And they actually make more money working for me than they do a fancy restaurant, which has been, they're awesome. They're so cool. I love working with experienced people. And then, so the one employee I laid off, I just have been in touch. And then this week they said they're ready to come back. So, for me, it has worked out really well. And now I have a full staff of really excellent people. And so I'm going to keep them on. And, so that was just kind of my situation was different, but I'm pretty lucky, I think.
Erica, keep doing what you're doing. It's great to hear that things are working out. Mark, do you have any tidbits you want to end before we wrap it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we need to reach out to people soon, taking temperatures, but PA has it sounds like a similar thing where you can remain on unemployment if your hours are reduced. So, we're hoping that will allow us to bring people back, but have them feel safe, because they're not working as many hours, and also safe, if they don't want to work, they can stay on unemployment. So I think we're going to figure all that out in the next few weeks.
Yeah, makes sense. Folks, we're going to wrap it here. To everyone in the audience, I'm sorry we couldn't answer all of your questions. We're going to work to do our best to figure out a way to try to get you answers on those, though. So please be patient with us. To our panelists, thank you all very much. We really appreciate your time. I'm inspired. I appreciate the positivity from all of you. I know it's not easy. It's a crazy time, but thank you. I'm sure we'll all be in touch again soon. Let us know how we can help you. Happy Friday, everybody. See you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, y'all. Stay safe.
Take care.
See ya.